Hello and welcome to We're So Bloody Early. My name is Jake. I'm 33 years old. I'm a husband and a recent dad. This show is going to be a focus on Bitcoin and how our journeys to this amazing new asset class has affected our lives. I personally have been lucky to work as a broker through my life, an investor, and a couple of failed startups behind me. I'm very excited to start this new project. And these are my two great co-hosts, Matty and Jigs.
Hi guys, I'm Matt. I'm a 35-year-old father and husband, massive lover of sport. I'm an aerospace engineer come entrepreneur. I've been running my own engineering consultancy now for 5 years. I have a diverse range of skills across multiple industry sectors, and that's now led me to my new love, Bitcoin.
And I'm Jigs, 41 years of age, husband, father of three. Worked in the cash and transit industry for 20 years in a labor-intensive job. Recently retired for about a year now. I'm a stay-home dad and a hybrid trader.
Together we're the co-hosts of the We're So Bloody Early show. In the future, you'll expect to hear from some special guests that we get along to talk through their experiences. Hopefully we'll be creating some educational content that brings our friends and family along on this journey as well. And we hope you enjoy. Always reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for being here. So the conversation today is going to be an introduction to who we are, our backgrounds, and what brings us to the table. Initially, we'll focus on the first, say, 10 to 20 years of our lives. We'll then move through to our 20s to 30s and then 30s to 40s, or for some of us who've reached that mark. And the ever-present discussion is around how money has affected us, what is money, and how Bitcoin falls into that. So just to kick things off and introduce myself, I grew up in the UK, as you can probably hear from my voice, and went through a very privileged schooling process there, and ended up with a business degree. To me, business has always been a central part of my life. Both sides of my family have run successful businesses over the last couple of 100 years. In particular, my father's side, we make beer. So we're a brewer in the south of the UK. The company is 240 years old, and it's the business that my father was running at the time before he sadly died when I was only 20 years old. But ever since being a small boy, you'd go past a pub car park and he'd be asking you questions about whether it was full or not, and how we could get more people down the pub. And running business has always been very central to my life and understanding how to make money. But I'd never really asked the question, well, what is money? And where does it come from? Why does it exist? And how might it affect us in our life? So, I mean, too many things to talk about in many ways, and I'm not quite sure where to start. But yeah, certainly the first 20 years or so of my life, it was around me, but I didn't necessarily understand what it was. So, Jigsy, we'll start with yourself. I mean, over the first, let's say, 20 years of your life, what did the world of business mean to you? And how did money affect your day-to-day life? And where did that take you to in the end?
Well, so went to school in South Africa. It was a public school run like a private school by the old boys. So I come from a lot of tradition, steeped in history. So the only thing I ever got taught about money as a kid growing up was, my dad saying to me, just save 10% of what you get. That just fell on deaf ears to me. But yeah, just battled through school, just focused on sport, and yeah, money was never really anything I thought about. I was a late bloomer to everything, late bloomer to drinking, late bloomer to virginity, late bloomer to understanding money.
I'll drink that.
Yeah. So, but the tortoise and the hare. I'm happy to be the tortoise because I'm pretty sure I'm going to win this race. But yeah, so just kicked on through there. I mean, I was bankrupt at 19. That's how much I didn't understand money. I just bought one car, bought another, lost my job, crashed a car, like all these stupid things as you do as a kid, not understanding anything about money. But fortunately enough, because of that, I wasn't really taught about this traditional finance system that is like being it's like being married to someone that treats you poorly, but yet you still stay with them. You know, that's basically what the banks are. It's just, they treat you so poorly and yet we stay with them. So yeah, that was my early 20s, bankrupt at 19. And
well, if I could just jump in there. So that's roughly the stage I want to get to so far. So when you say bankrupt at 19, I mean, what does that actually mean?
well, here in Australia, you can't pay back your loans to the banks, so you have to declare bankruptcy, which was a terrible, I mean, I went and saw a financial advisor through the council. So it's just a free financial advisor who advised me to declare bankruptcy at 19, which effectively meant that I can't go take a loan. I can't get a mobile phone contract. You know, I can't do anything, which was kind of good in some sort of aspects, because it taught me that if I want something, I have to save for it. I can't go and just get a credit card and get what I want. If I want it bad enough, I have to work for it and I have to save for it. So for 7 years, yeah, I couldn't do anything like that. I mean, I wasn't supposed to leave the country and stuff like that as well.
Wow.
Jigs, if what I've seen, mate, you might need to save for a new pair of underwear from what I seen a bit earlier.
That's an incredible story in a sense, Jigsy, actually. There's not many people who would have ended up in that that official financial state, and it's a kind of stark reminder that this does happen. I mean, the world around us is just this credit everywhere. You know, people living in credit card debt or whatever the case might be. These new services like Afterpay, and you can just flick between Afterpay and Latitude Pay and all the other different providers, and ultimately you're getting something that you can't actually pay for now, and then you have to pay it back on the terms of the company that sells it to you
in the
and
future.
Perhaps people aren't educated enough to understand what that actually means, and it's a situation that I'm sure ends up being like a black mark against your name for the rest of time. What a formative few years, Jigsy. Thank you for sharing that. So Matty, in your case then, so you know, growing up and your teenage years, what was or what influence did the business space or money specifically have on yourself?
Yeah, I came from pretty humble roots myself. Work ethic's probably been the greatest gift my family's given me. I think there'd be very few that would outwork me. And as a result of that, I learned to scrap, and that really highlighted my entrepreneurial skills. I mean, in year 5, I was renting pencils and pens to students that didn't have a pencil case for a return to be able to buy my lunch. I was selling illegal Super Dupers ice blocks on the side at 50% discount.
Sorry, Matty. What is a Super Duper or whatever?
It's an ice block. So all the Aussies out there will probably remember them, at least from our era back in the day. Little
like a frozen lolly.
Yeah,
okay,
basically.
Okay.
So I'd illegally ransack a fridge and figured out that the canteen wasn't going to miss them. And I mean, that wasn't the right way to do it, but I just figured that I needed to find a way. And I think renting the pencils was pretty ingenious for myself. So money was scarce. Money was hard to come by. We were taught to appreciate it. But money came and went, unfortunately, in our family very quickly. Dad was an entrepreneur in his own right, came from a trade background, went into vineyards. GFC really hit Dad pretty hard. Mum and Dad, that's a bit later on. But during the period, I learned that money had a means to an end, but I didn't understand what that meant. I remember Dad borrowing more, and I didn't know what that meant. You know, Dad would borrow more to buy an asset. Dad would borrow more to buy a piece of land, and the ability to sit back and understand that got my curiosity up very early. So I think that combined with my entrepreneurial brain, I always looked at myself as a kid that wanted to succeed for himself and prove through my heritage that I could use a platform that they set me to really provide for the next generation. And my curiosity really developed then very, very quickly about money, and learning what fiat is now. It's a different beast to what the boomers that I were around with thought it was. So very eye-opening, that's for sure.
Well, and as 20-year-olds, one is never the finished product per se. You know, you're still so young and learning about the world. For myself, I briefly touched on, my father actually died when I was 20, and that was a moment of great change, and just to move into the next like decade of our lives, so to speak. So
sorry for interrupting, Jake, mate. I mean, you mentioned the word briefly.
Well, I just touched on it in my introduction, but I'm happy to talk about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I mean, from my end, you spoke about generational business, a privileged education. I'd like to elaborate, at least hear a little bit about that, what that meant to you, and what maybe fiat currency meant to you and your family in that period of your life. And then obviously with your father's unfortunate passing, how that impacted you at that point in time. I imagine there was enormous stress on your shoulders during that phase.
Yeah, so life-changing moment, simple as that. Yeah, so January the 1st, 2009, got a phone call. I was in my mate's living room just after a huge night partying for New Year's, and mum's calling. I'm like, fuck that, don't answer the phone, busy, just chilling out here, smoking a spliff or whatever. Ignore her, definitely don't answer. And then the second phone call goes and you're like, oh, fuck, okay, what's happened? And by the third time, you're like, right, better answer it. So I go into the kitchen area, answer the phone, and mum's like, Jake, there's been a terrible accident. Your father's dead and you need to come home. So I had to walk downstairs, talk to my friends, tell them what had happened. Everyone's obviously stunned, like, fuck, all right, what does that even mean? I mean, I'm stunned. Got in the car, followed my friend who helped me drive home, basically, and got back to the family house, and just pandemonium at home, basically. Mum's in tears, my aunties come over, my brother and sister in tears. The whole thing's a shit show, basically. He was 48 years old. He had a heart attack with his dogs out in the woods, doing what he loved. But it was it's a fucking sad day, frankly. In terms of my father, he was a passionate businessman, and he was the managing director of our family company, which has been going now. I would be the 8th generation of the business to be involved if I did, and I've got cousins that are in the company now. And I guess he taught me always to work hard, to pay your taxes, and part of that process, I was at a boarding school. So from the age of 8 to 18, I went to live away from home for my education. It was deemed the best possible start they could give me in life. Interestingly, now as an older adult, there are all sorts of psychological issues that I've had personally from that experience. A lot of like the abandonment issues a small child has when it's left away from its parents, and you've got to survive in a school where, you know, it was all boys initially, and they sense weakness, right? They can smell it, like, you know, breakfast time, right? They're in trouble. So you don't show fear. You cannot show fear, because if you do, you get bullied, basically. So you learn to not feel. Just don't feel how you are. And that's something that's then stuck with me through my life. And equally, it's always driven me to try and gain their attention, and to always push to get to certain levels of achievement that I thought would gain the attention of my parents. But psychologically, that process actually was just me doing what the school had sold them to do. So top grades, you know, 3 A's, and then to a top business school, and did what I needed to do there. And yeah, so Dad died whilst I was at uni, and he died very suddenly out of the blue. And it was on the back of the financial crisis that you touched on, Matty. So October 2008, none of our pubs were taking the kind of revenue they were supposed to be taking versus the targets for the year. Dad was super stressed about the whole thing. You know, when you study macroeconomics, one of the first things that a tightening or like contracting economy does is reduce disposable income spending. So people just don't go and spend money in the pub on food and booze like they did before. And, you know, the revenue of the business is down. And long story short, he just didn't handle the stress. And he basically had a savage heart attack during his holiday period of that Christmas, because he had all these stakeholders, family members, long-term business partners that were you know, in his head, completely and utterly reliant on his business. And he was right in a sense, but
So, Jake, can I just ask one question, mate? You just touched on something there that I think is paramount throughout this series. Did Dad speak to you at all, mate, about those stresses that you mentioned, or is that something that you just sensed, in hindsight or reflection?
He didn't talk about it.
This is really important. I mean, this is Father's Day here in Australia, and this is really important for us being young dads, that we should take something and learn something from this, that we should talk to our kids and
100%.
and show them that it's okay to be hurt or weak. So that's something that I'll be taking away from this, definitely.
Well, and I'm very conscious of that, 100%. It's so my father's cousin took me for lunch, and he used to run the company with him, and he said, "Think about your dad, Jake. He was an accident waiting to happen." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, thinking he was going to try and be nice about my dad, but his whole process of taking me for lunch was just like, you got to get on with life, mate. Stop fucking around, basically. Which I didn't take too kindly to at the time, if I'm honest. But the answer is no, he didn't share the responsibility and the stress well at all, and he didn't talk to me about it at all. There are so many things that I've been influenced by from this stage in my life that I'd like to take into being a father myself, and certainly being more open with how I feel and being more honest with the situation I'm in on a day-to-day basis with my kids eventually is something I would like to do. And yeah, I mean, so it's just a life-changing moment. I actually don't work for the family business. I now live over in Australia. I mean, as a teenager, the idea that I'd be married to an Aussie and have an Aussie child and live in Melbourne, just forget it. Like, the Aussies are the wallabies and blokes in flip-flops and Fosters. Like, you don't go there. Like, they occasionally turn up and
have you actually seen someone drink a Fosters? Have you seen someone drink a Fosters?
But I've seen Fosters adverts. There's beach huts and like beaches and that. But yeah, I mean, very formative time in my life, Matty. So after that fateful day, within 18 months, we'd sold our family home. And this really is the core of absolutely why we're here today. And so as a young man, I inherited money much, much earlier in my life than I ever would have done. The house had been in the family for 3 generations. There was a disagreement within the family as to whether or not it should or shouldn't have been sold. And there was a lot of emotion going around and not enough communication. And my dad's mother was involved in that. She was, living very close by, and she'd brought her whole family up inside that house. And even now, it's incredibly emotional, the whole subject and the fallout from that particular fateful day. I don't want to speed too far ahead or to talk too much for that matter, but definitely please ask more questions like that, because it's something I'd really like to talk about whilst we'd work on this project together. And had Dad not died and had I not inherited money earlier in my life, I wouldn't have been on the investment journey that I've been on the last 10 years. That is critical to what I now have as a basis to understand the opportunity that Bitcoin actually is. And that's largely because I've fucked up. I've made some bad investments. I've understood how hard investments are to actually get correct. And there's just been a whole lot of touch points that become relevant through the next decade, from like 2021 to where I am today, 33. So yeah, loads of stuff will come up, I guess, as we carry on talking. But
yeah, it's interesting.
Any questions? Do jump in. I mean, or any similar stories that you guys had.
Going back to you and how you went to boarding school. I mean, I remember, I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, and we went and played another school an hour away from where I lived. And after we finished our match, with 9, 10 years old, we were waiting for the first team to play. They're all around 12, 13 years old. I was sitting around waiting for the school bus and first team to play. And there were all these kids from the school we were playing all running around. And I said, why are you guys still here? Like, why haven't you gone home? And they're like, no, we're boarders. We stay at the school. We live here. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we live here. We don't go home. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like the greatest thing I've ever heard. So that day when I got home, I said to my parents at the age of 9, I want to go to boarding school next year. And they just were like, what the fuck? They couldn't believe, which is interesting because Jake's going here like this is, you've had some psychological issues from that of feeling abandonment, whereas I just felt like I belonged. But then again, to that's what I love that. But that's where I got bullied as a kid as well. And so I learned to put up this defense mechanism as when I wasn't smart enough to understand money or anything, I would just say, yeah, I'm dumb. And that was my defense mechanism, so that pick on someone else, you're going to get a reaction from. So that's interesting, just how you felt that from your experience at boarding school.
Well, I've only connected with that feeling and understood it, what it is, in the last 18 months. So I've done like a lot of work, actually talked to a therapist about it, for the best part of 12 months, on a bi-weekly basis, talking through how I felt. And she was teaching me how to feel. And through that process, I started to understand a lot of these undercurrent feelings that I'd had for 20 years, which are around abandonment and not feeling valued and being scared. And you build layers on top of that, which are defense mechanisms. And I was just fine the whole way through school. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. And at times, I made some of the best friends of my life, of course.
Sorry, Jake, mate. Just Jigs, one thing that, again, I pointed that question to Jake because there's behind all of us in that early bracket that we're speaking about, in that sort of 10 to 20 early adolescence. I've met a few South Africans in my life, and I know life in South Africa can be quite difficult and challenging. You spoke about being bullied, and as Jake's just mentioned, he's come to realise through maturity and seeking to find answers, for a better word, to become the best version of himself. And I know you've done the same as yourself, Jigs. I mean, fear for me has been used in a positive way, right? Like, I've used fear as opportunity versus fear as victim and failure. And I know that you've done the same, but growing up in South Africa, the negative connotations that associated with bullying and stuff, how did that drive you to change your thought processes once you migrated, and how hard was it back then, mate? Because I imagine it would have been pretty difficult.
Well, yeah, look, it's not as, I don't want to fall on the and hide, I was bullied because, once my first year of high school, I mean, I just went, like, to me, school was just about playing sport. Like, I just thought I was the black duck of the family, and I just focused on sport. I never thought I was smart enough. I was told I wasn't smart enough by my peers, so I just started to believe it. But I failed my first year of high school, and the next year, by failing, you become, you're the new kid in the school. You're all on the same level, but you got your peers that pick on you because they want to be elevated and push you down the bottom of the barrel. But when you fail, now the new kids come into the school, and I've already been there a year. So now I have this new opportunity where I know something they don't. So now I'm all of a sudden elevated above them, and I became the bully. So I've been on both sides, and it's an ugly side to be on. It's an ugly side to be on both sides. So when I moved to Australia, I got a whole new clean slate. I got to redo it again at 16. So that was massive for me to come in and just stay in the middle and don't be either or. But yeah, I've had both sides. They're not nice sides.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure Aussie life was very different as a teenager to South Africa life.
Yeah, look, in terms of South Africa, especially boarding school and that, it's very, not military run, but it's very, you know what I'm trying to say. Whereas, like, for instance, coming here to Australia, when I started my school here, I was wearing my socks up because that's like, you got to be looking good and you got to be smart and everything. And then the kids here, they all wear their socks down, and I got kind of picked on here because I'm wearing my socks up. And I'm like, well, that's what I know. Like, that's how I roll, you know. But yeah, I did find it hard that Aussies are a lot more laid back. The way they spoke to their teachers and stuff, like, I found that really hard to accept. So that was hard. But then, you know, I went to two different schools that did different things differently. So the private school experience here was a bit more tighter, but nowhere near as tight as and rigid as the South African schooling.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Jigsy. And so, Matty, to ask yourself then, so as a late teenager and into your early 20s, so did you finish school? What kind of education path did you follow? And how did you end up in the world of business after that?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had a great family upbringing. My family was super supportive. I've been very lucky to be blessed both academically and with sport in my life. Carrying an extra few kilos now, but we're working on that. But yeah, I was basically a straight A student the whole way through. In year 7, I wrote an epilogue where I wrote I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, and that came through to fruition. I finished.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, I finished. I was probably the funny thing, Jigs, it was probably a bit the same as yourself. I didn't really think I was overly smart. I had a lot of self-doubt. And to be honest with you, again, this is, further down the track about the business, that question that you asked, Jake, is I really had a problem with a fear of failure. And it probably wasn't until about 8 years ago where unfortunately I lost a stillborn son, Patrick, that my view changed. And we'll touch on that a bit later, but I truly believed I missed a sporting opportunity career, which I truthfully regret today because I was too scared that I wasn't good enough. I had the talent, but to become elite, you need more than just talent alone. And that fear of failure engulfed me in my late teens. And so I just focused on what I knew I was 100% good at, and that was learning. I was an incredible learner, and I qualified with first class honors with aerospace engineering. I studied a bit of Japanese. So Satoshi, I wonder if I could have a conversation with you one day. And having that background of the migrant background, my grandfather's a huge inspiration. I'd love to tell his story one day. It's absolutely incredible, and that's driven me to part of the person I am. But I look back, I watched my granddad migrate out to Australia through a war-torn country with a suitcase. I seen my father create business, watched him succeed and fail. And I went through my own failures, losing a son, as I mentioned, and I said, enough's enough. I know I'm good enough. And probably the most powerful sentence anyone's ever said to me in my life is when I transferred into the business world was my dad said to me, Matt, you've been so good at everything you've ever touched in life. For once, please do not give up on me. And that was my first day of business. And he just looked me in the eyes and...
Come on.
Yeah, honestly, it was just so confronting because he was right. Like, I had a job opportunity with Airbus in Toulouse, France. Here I am as an aerospace engineer, one of the greatest aeronautical jobs that a young engineer could dream of. And I knocked it back to go on the tools flushing full time for a year. And the reason I did that, people thought I was crazy. I spent 4 years studying. I spent 3 years working as an aeronaut. And here I am holding some flushing boxes and some flushing tools, plasterboard tools. And again, my old man comes up to me and goes, what the hell are you doing? You're the smartest flusher in the world. Go back and try something in the civil structural space. And so along my way, I've needed some help. I've needed some help recognizing that I am good enough, backing my own judgment. And again, leading on to that business decision, having, those sound words, those sound upbringing, I came across a chance meeting with Jigs. And if it wasn't for those previous experiences, good and bad, that I've had, I don't think I would have been in a position to listen to the almighty man. And he is genuinely an amazing
and we'll drink for you, my friend.
Yeah, he's genuinely an amazing person. But those life experiences allowed me to listen and learn about Bitcoin. And without that previous experience, those previous failures, those previous self-doubt, but also those wins, again, I don't think I would have been in a position to even understand or want to listen or want to learn. And I want to be able to impart a bit of that wisdom into people about, so investing from fiat to Bitcoin is scary. I get it. I truthfully get it for boomers. Like it's really, really foreign. And I grew up with that upbringing, and I want to share a bit of that as we go along as well. But it's an exciting journey that we're all on, that's for sure.
And so, Matty, so many of those things are interesting, but so aeronautical engineering is a seriously, to me anyway, that's like a tech heavy degree. And so when I meet someone in the Bitcoin space that's got that kind of background, who has understood the value of it potentially with that technical knowledge in mind, super interesting. To take a step back before then though, so you mentioned with sports. So what sport were you playing?
So as a young man, I was quite a gifted soccer player.
Okay.
Had some really unfortunate injuries that I had some great opportunities presented to me as a teenager. I then went and played golf, and I got down to scratch really quickly. By the age of 16, I was just a raw talent. I knocked that back. I cracked the shits because my coach wanted to send me over to the States to play college golf, and mum and dad rightfully couldn't afford it. And so I literally threw a tantrum and threw the clubs away. I didn't realize that I could still do that here in Australia. It was just my ego and pride that got in the way of that. And I mean, today I play regularly. I still play off three, and I can enjoy it. But at that time, I was seriously talented. And finally, football, I sort of came out of oblivion. My dad was a very good football player. He got offered a contract in the 80s with the equivalent of an SANFL, the West Torrens. For all these Aussies that know their football, they'll appreciate that. And we lived on a farm, so I used to kick the footy daily at Pencil Pines. I was an incredible set shot, and I found sport in my life was really important because it gave me clarity of mind. You know, whether it was running, jumping, kicking, punching, you know, that freedom of mind, of a high intellect brain, you know, it can buzz pretty quickly. So I found sport was a really good way to really level me. And in footy, I just was so in love with it because I had the opportunity. I lived on 22 acres and I had a football in my hand every day. And at 17, Dad goes, son, why don't you go have a kick? And I don't want to bore people, but in the space of 7 games, I broke a country team's goal kicking record. I kicked 11 goals in my 3rd game. I got scouted by a SANFL team. And after 4 preseason games, I got named in the SANFL first team, which I still to this day, I don't think my dad knows. And talk about the fear of failure. I lied to my coach and said that I couldn't commit to training because of my aerospace degree, and it was nothing but a lie. I was just so scared that I wasn't good enough.
Because I was going to ask, Matty, and you touched on it nicely at the end there. So what would you say is your biggest regret from that period of your life? And what did you now take away from that or learn from it?
Yeah, biggest regret was listening to the self-doubt, letting the self-doubt over cloud the brain and take away what is logic versus illogic. And so what I took away from that was, in life, you get the opportunity to presented information if you're open-minded enough and or talented enough, etc., etc. So when an opportunity comes, and if to myself, you do your research and it feels right, it's okay to actually then act on that. You don't have to be reckless and, you know, do something that may jeopardize yourself or your family, be that well-being or financial, but it's okay to actually have a crack at stuff. And I know myself that with my talent alone, I'm in a position to make good decisions consistently. And I live by that. If you make good decisions consistently, you usually leave yourself in a great position. And so from that, I've learned that if something's presented to me and that fear of failure is on my shoulder, I have learnt, as you mentioned earlier, with help from psychologists, life coaches, business coaches, to how to separate the fear of failure versus recklessness and opportunity, and just base something with facts and have a crack. And when logic is logic, for me, it's as clear as the day, you know, as clear as a blue sky, and I'll just go for it. And that's what Bitcoin is for me. You know, I just see it. I get it. it's very, very clear about the fiat system and why DeFi, should I use the word, decentralization of our money, why that is so important. And it's happening right beneath us very quickly. I'm a late person into the Bitcoin space, but my experience has held me back from that as well, and I have had previous opportunities to hop in there, but again, that fear of failure, of that unknown, probably stopped me a bit earlier, to be honest with you, and we'll touch on it a bit later.
And Matty, the title of our new podcast, We're So Bloody Early, is very fitting for this kind of point in the conversation, in that it may feel like you're late or that you've maybe missed the boat already, but from what we're learning every day, that just isn't true. There's so many different metrics we can prove that with. But
yeah, you're 100% early, and I think Jigs will touch on some of those metrics. I mean, Jigs, maybe we're kind of a bit premature with this, but in terms of the uptake of Bitcoin as a percentage of the population, it's quite small, isn't it, mate?
It's only around 2% or something crazy.
Yeah, I thought I was late when I started learning about it. I heard it first in early 2019 and only started investing in mid 2019. And I thought I was late. I mean, the prices then were around $9,000. So yeah.